actually work. Good morning, everyone. Morena tātou. Hopefully not here for a long time, but short, sharp business time. Feels a bit odd, doesn't it, coming back to council after our final council meeting where we've, kind of moved on a little bit to this. But anyway, good morning to you all. I will ask someone to volunteer to do a karakia, please. Do you want to do it, Mark?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely, just got to find it. Right, tēnā koutou katoa. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, ki mā kinekina te uta ki mā taratara ki tai, e he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhanga, tihei, mauriora.
Thank you, and good morning. We go very shortly into public excluded, but let's just get through a few little bits and pieces and then set the scene. Apologies from Councillor Naidu-Rowe. I'll move. Someone seconds it. Dave seconds it. All in favour?
I have a meeting at 11:30, which I've arranged because I believe that this meeting may finish then.
Yeah, same. But
okay.
Hoping that will be finished.
No. Well,
the
trouble is I've got more questions to ask than I thought.
All right, I move the confirmation of agenda, seconded by Councillor Maxine. All in favour?
Sorry, an extra apology.
Oh, go on then.
Dave, I didn't get him a coffee apparently, and he was most offended.
This is his last chance. He stuffed it.
Well, Dave, what are you doing at 11:30? Because I understand coffee's on Ryan.
I've got a question about the agenda. I see here the Deputy Mayor's birthday shout, because it's his birthday today, and I'm just wondering, where does that fit into the meeting? Is it?
Yeah. All right. Declarations of public interest, are there any? No. Public forum, there is none. Confirmation of the open minutes is there. I'll move. Maxine will second. All in favour? Before we move to public excluded, however, I think it's probably worth just setting a broad context about what we're here to do today.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Yeah, I'll just give a short introduction here in the open section, just to describe the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund and where we are at the moment. So, zoom out at the broadest level, this is a $200.6 million funding package to deliver a set of infrastructure that will deliver what it's safe to say are transformative benefits for the central city. And the infrastructure package includes the Ruakiri Reservoir, a new reservoir up there, Stage 1 reservoir, pedestrian bridge from Hamilton East to the central city, investigation works that will essentially set the blueprint for future stormwater, wastewater and transport works, and a pump station and associated water elements. The grant funding that we're seeking is $150.6 million, and that money is a non-repayable grant, and if we were successful, that would be the largest infrastructure grant that Hamilton's ever received. So there's a real significance of the scale of the funding. And I guess just in terms of its alignment, so the council and the government are very focused on building up rather than out, and having inner city urbanisation, and this is clearly right in that channel, and is closely aligned with our Plan Change 12 and the MDRS legislation. So I think there's a real alignment here. And I guess just in terms of the procedures, so today we're taking to the council the funding and housing agreements for the IAF, which are the fundamental components of the Kāinga Ora offer, and the associated sort of detailed pieces, which we'll go through in the next section. And if the council approves this today, we'll have a short period of time to just finalise those agreements under a C delegation, and Kāinga Ora are expected to finalise their decisions at the end of October and make their public announcements with some other of the infrastructure bids from around the country in early November.
Okay, so if there any questions in the broad, not about the specifics of the what's in the public excluded, then, you know, now's the time to raise them. Yeah.
Paula, what's envisaged in terms of making this public now? I realise some things can't be made public. We're doing something now, which is good. Some things can't go public until after the government makes an announcement, but there may be things we can talk about what we've applied for, which area it's confined to more exactly, and that sort of stuff. Because the reason I'm asking is I know in private conversation a couple of councillors have been a bit concerned, as I am, that it looks like it's being done behind closed doors, and to the extent it is, it's sort of not our fault, but this is not our money. But it would be good to get as much out of it as we can.
That would be a good question to have answered, because, you know, two things have occurred. One, that this is a really big project, and at some stage we do need to involve the public in decisions that are fundamentally going to change the city, that's for sure. But in this instance, some of the commercial aspects and details we need to keep private until we've nutted that out and signed anything that's robust in that respect. But of course, it has already been, in some parts of this, have already filtered into the public realm through this council, somebody at the council leaking, and we've had to address issues of public sensitivity accordingly. So Angela, myself, and Ryan attended a meeting where we had to spend a lot of time answering many questions. So horses bolted in terms of some of that. Do you want to make a comment, Blair, in terms of...
Look, I think the substantive topic here being the bid for $150.6 million is in the public domain, Councillor Dave, and we're certainly happy to continue to provide some information. I think there's elements that of course, this is all subject to ministerial final decision, and I think you haven't heard a lot from the government because they are very much only wanting to speak about bids that they've approved. So really any communications that's coming from Arian. So we will certainly look to continue to provide some information, albeit it is all contextualised around it's our bid for $150.6 million of infrastructure, which, as Greg said, is primarily around two major elements which benefits the central city, being waters infrastructure and some transport infrastructure, which then supports our wider focus on the central city. So we're happy to continue to find some appropriate communications messaging.
Maybe and also reference to the total volume of housing residential units that would be provided with, which doesn't identify individual developers.
Yes, that's correct. And I think as Greg has outlined, the bid speaks to up to 4,000 dwellings in the next decade, so happy to mention that. And I think that's in line, and Greg, you may wish to talk to this, but it's in line with everything we're doing around Plan Change 12, around our HUG strategy, around our Central City Transformation Plan. So it's everything strategically aligned here.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I have a lot of questions which I'll ask during PX, but the one question I do want to ask now is, could staff explain to me again why we should be making this decision now on the eve of an election?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because I think ultimately some will be concerned, and rightly so, at the timing, and I really want that re-explained.
Yeah, so I also had that question put to me, so I believe Lachlan is available. Oh, there you are, couldn't see you. So do you want to, because, yeah, there was a couple of questions put to me about that too, the legality of making such a far-reaching decision a few days before the election, and whatever other reasons you've got to be concerned, Ewan.
I wonder, Mayor Paula, there's two parts that maybe Greg just answers the first part, which is why a decision is required today, and then probably Greg also just touch on the various touch points we've had to date on this matter as well, and then the second part, the legal question, maybe Lachlan can.
Because believe me, I tried not to have this meeting, just so close.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. I mean, the expressions of interest for this infrastructure fund were lodged in December last year, and essentially these have been moving through the council and had, multiple, full reports going to the council throughout that period, and there's been a reference group of elected members to provide staff extra guidance, And essentially we've been stepping through this throughout the term of this council. I think there's some coincidence in that Kāinga Order's deadline of mid-October happens to be at the end of this election cycle. I don't think there's no, that's just a coincidence. So my opinion, just from a process and a staff perspective, that this has been provided in detail to the council throughout, the best part of nearly a year, and that this is the point where, all of that work comes together and we're seeking an approval. That's my short answer. There's nothing unusual about it. And I guess the Kāinga Order announcements in November and just us wanting to make sure that this big amount of grant funding, we don't jeopardise it, is to just get our council decision in prior to their announcements. So that would be my view on it.
Thank you, Your Worship. The legal position on the meeting and the constitution of the meeting is very straightforward. This is a perfectly legal and properly constituted meeting of council. End of story. Each of you as elected members have full decision-making capacity to deal with the resolutions that are in front of you in this meeting. That's it. I can explain why if you'd want to hear it, but that is the legal advice.
Any other questions, Ewan, on that? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, it was clear. We are... Oh, sorry, you're behind the screen. Hi, Rob.
I'll put my hand up if you like. Yeah, look, I've got some questions also to ask in public excluded. Hopefully not as many as Councillor Ewan has. But I have got a question now, and that is, Greg, from your presentation just before, you mentioned that this is a contestable fund. And I would suspect that there are other councils around the country working as diligently and as hard as we are to try and get some of this funding. If we didn't get $150 million, 150.6 million, which is what you mentioned, the figure, is there a and KO offered us less? Is there a plan B in place given that we could do less, or would we have to do the same but fund it ourselves?
The way this process is being run is really that we have a proposal for 150 and we're asking for approval for that or not from Kāinga Order. So there's been no discussions about any change to that number. I think the one change to that number was 5 or 6 months ago when they did a significant scaling back. But I would be confident to say that we're talking about 150.6 and not any other number.
So we'll either get that or get nothing?
I'm pretty confident to say yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Can I maybe just add to that? Well, Greg, you may want to speak to this. Councillor Rob, the risk that we face is that Kāinga Order still seeks the same outcomes in terms of housing yield and other things, but diminishes the funds, and I think that becomes the challenge that staff are trying to balance here. It is our advice that this is the minimum level of package and funding that we believe we can recommend to council alongside the outcomes that Kāinga Order are seeking through the bid. So to diminish the funding further diminishes the ability for us to then to undertake to deliver the level of housing yield and bits and pieces that comes with it.
And that's really the reason for my question, in the sense that we haven't got the debt capacity to make good, whatever the shortfall might be in terms of that offer. Yeah.
Well, Mark has some experience with some of the previous versions of this, which is the shovel-ready. And Mark, what's your view? Are we expecting any different number, or? I mean, my sense is that we're talking about 150.6. Is he?
Yeah, I think both parties have basically locked into the process at this point, and we're down to the pointy end. And I don't think anyone's got, certainly KO's got no appetite to change things, because they've sort of allocated their fund. It's a bit of a problem for them too.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Sorry, I inhaled it. I was thinking, and therefore I couldn't drink and think at the same time. Yeah. Would you come and rescue? Would anybody come and rescue me if I was? Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I have a question. I'm just try and put it so I don't get into the public excluded realm of things. In terms of their yield globally, right? This bid determines yield of housing that will meet the requirements of Kāinga Ora and other funding partners in this. Where those houses are ultimately distributed, we've got a bit of an idea, but that could change it. Damn it. There you go. Could that change across the whole city? So, I mean, you know, look, so many houses here, so many houses here, so many houses here. We're putting in where we believe we have reasonable endeavours to create those opportunities, but nothing's set at this point, is it, in terms of exactly where the houses go?
Well, so in the bid there's 4,000 housing units, and that's across the period 2023 to 2034. And so you raise a good point. Obviously, there's never certainty about where houses go exactly, but half of that 2,000 we actually have in either consented or in the consenting pipeline or with plans.
Half is already...
Yeah, that's right. And the other half essentially relies on, you know, our expectations of population growth and the changing trend. And we expect Plan Change 12 to influence that. So I think there is significant certainty. I've spent quite a lot of time talking to the developers, and, you know, they're firmly, their ambitions are to build these houses in the central city. So I think there is a level of certainty there, probably quite a good one.
But in terms of individual sites within that CBD, there'll still be movement.
There will be movement in some of them, I expect, but
or some of them may fail to get off the line.
So this comes to the Housing Outcomes Agreement, which asks the developers to sign up to reasonable endeavours. So they will use their reasonable endeavours to build them on the sites, and the agreement essentially says if you do transact the land, then you will essentially compensate in some way to have the same level of housing outcomes, and that's how Kāinga Ora attempt to, you know, wrap up and make sure there is some certainty about the central city development.
I think just to answer me Paula's question further, it is possible, me Paula, that not every site that's envisaged will develop in the way that ultimately is envisaged at the present time. The Housing Outcomes Agreement provides for that to occur. There are all sorts of processes to go through for many of these developments, and each of those processes may result in projects not proceeding, not eventuating the way they're currently envisaged. And I guess that's been both the opportunity and the challenge of this bid. It's not like a greenfield site where we have a defined settlement pattern through a structure plan. We are dealing with a central city, a built environment where we are looking to, over time, intensify it substantially through current and future planning provisions. The land is enabled for multiple uses. It's not just commercial, it's not just retail, it's also residential. So developers' intentions to on a particular site may change tomorrow. But over time, as a council, we are seeking for the central city, walkable catchment, to be a much greater, denser living environment. And I guess this bid supports that with infrastructure. And that's the core premises of this.
Yeah, I think my question leans into yours. Go, Ewan.
Yeah, and very brief. I just want to, I feel I know the answer, but I just want staff to reconfirm and make this really clear. The reference to Kāinga Ora in this context is not as a social housing entity. It's as an enabling department of government for infrastructural spend. Could you just confirm that?
That's right. So the lead, Andrew Brown, who you met, he is the commercial lead for Kāinga Ora. So that's their commercial arm, and if you go and talk to their acquisitions team, then they're like departments in a council that are in some way connected but separate, yeah.
Right, so it's a very separate...
Yeah, it is actually.
Because a lot of people I keep hearing is, oh, it's about social housing, and I say, well, in this context, No, it's about infrastructure spend and investment.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to remove any doubt. Thank you.
Okay, all right. No further questions? All right. You got the answer to when the public would be involved in. So that will be when the detail comes, the next phase of the project with the detail. When we start to decide detail, Greg, that's when the public consultation occurs, or what?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So I was trying to go off the question I think Ewan was asking about public engagement. So this is just a broad pitch for the funding, but when things start to roll out in this location, or this location, that's the time when we will engage with other affected parties, yes?
So this is like disruption in terms of construction and those types of things?
Well, no, I don't think we should. Yes and no. I think there's other things we know. I mean, it's out in the public realm. We know that there's some concerns about one of the sites, and that the local area would like to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it in any great detail because I'm not going to be that person that gives away the confidential information. But we do know there's a strong will of that group to talk with council from the very beginning about any development that occurs on that site.
I would suggest it's maybe easier to talk about it in PX, but I think I understand what you're saying, and yes, there are plans about that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be tricky. I'm just going to say, when do we start to socialise with the public around these projects?
I'll probably pass that to Blair if
it's
closer
not
to
a
this.
tricky question, but it's an honest, upfront question that I think the general public would like to know.
Well, I think there's two things here. The first part is the substantive matter today, which is our bid to the government via Kāinga Ora for the funds. That's the primary matter. The associated partners to the bid through the housing outcomes agreements, each of them have their own proposals that will work through their own process. Some of those are known. Some of those are publicly disclosed projects by third parties that have signed or will be signing letters of support. Some will sign a housing outcomes agreement. So I think, Paula, each will be on their case and their merits, and we'll work with those developers to showcase those as we can. And I think that's part of the wider Central City story. We want to be able to talk up these positive developments in the context of Central City. So as soon as we can, with each developer, start to talk about them, we will. I think that's probably as far as I can say today.
Okay, thank you. Sarah.
Can answer this or not, but in terms of the overall funding pool that we're applying to, do you know if it's oversubscribed, or are we still ultimately competing for funds with others at the moment?
It's a good question. My understanding is, as it stands, Kāinga Ora will have a set of proposals. If you add them all up, they'll come to the $1 billion, but they have reserves waiting. And ours is the largest bid across all of them across the country. They have said to us that if our bid wasn't to succeed, that they would then move to their reserve list essentially and look to provide the funding in that way. So it was heavily oversubscribed when the proposals rolled in, like 5-1, so 5 billion of proposals. But I think now we're at the stage at the sharp end where we are that, the sum of the current ones would be $1 billion with reserve.
And in looking at the worst case scenario that they say in the end, no thank you, with this one, do we have other bids for Hamilton sitting on the reserve list?
No, we do not. Okay. We had Rotokauri was on the reserve list, and there was a small one in North Rototuna, but my understanding is that, we were advised that Rotokauri had been taken off the reserve list, and I will assume that the Rototuna North is not on there, but I'm not 100%.
Okay, so it's this or nothing.
It is a bit of an all or nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move into public excluded. And then I guess whatever we can report out, we'll, just because I know Stephen's here from the media as well, but we'll be able to report some something out of that, presumably.
I think ultimately, in terms of right now, Paula, subject to council approving the recommendations today, that we'll be finalising and submitting the bid before closing time later this month, and then we wait to hear the government decision. So we will be in the hands of the process. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, sorry, we will now move up. I'll move that we go to public excluded. Councillor Hamilton will second. Everyone else is all in favour. Did you? Oh, sorry. Oh. We did do the minutes. Yeah, we did that first. Yep. I'm just waiting for you to come out. Oh, so councillors, we've moved into public. I've had a mover and a seconder into public excluded, and don't really care. But we just got to vote for it. Sarah, thank you.
Any against? No.
Any against? No, there's not.
For a much smaller day than the first one.